Go to
Well,
do
I
it.
don't know if you're waiting for the thingy to come back.
No, I'm gonna.
We're live now. Alrighty. Okay, we are live. So, hello. This is AV Rant. This is behind the scenes. This is our live recording session of episode number 667, which is actually 668. But oh well, we're stuck where we are now with those numbers. And yeah, you are being warned. This is the behind the scenes version you are watching, which means that any streaming problems that we have, that's just going to be what it is. So there is a complete video version that posts later in the week that will at least for sure have cleaned up audio. So yeah, there you go. That's the preamble. Tom can start when he pleases.
Do you want a donation from today? We got a donation today, or do you want me to say
Uh,
that for next week?
say for next week if it was today.
It was today.
Okay.
Time is it? Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. I hope Tom is enjoying his now Google-branded Fitbit, even though it wasn't Google-branded when he got it. But
Are they going to replace the glass on it? Because I smashed it the other day.
Oh, well done. Yes, Google bought
Well,
Fitbit.
I don't let anybody in this house take a phone out of the box until they put a case on it. But for some reason, I thought this thing was invulnerable. My wife's been wearing hers for 3 years, doing every exercise under the sun. It's never had a problem. I have had it for less than a month. I go to the gym. I'm reaching for a hold, and I smash my Fitbit into it, shatters the glass.
Yep.
So I go, as one would do, and call a local company because I don't want to have to go through their. I'd rather just pay the money than go through trying to some sort of warranty thing, which they're probably not going to pay for anyway since I smashed it. and I called the company and they're like, "Oh, well, we can't find any information on how to replace that glass. Let me look into it and get back to you." I'm like, okay. While you're doing that, I went ahead and went online and did some research. Yeah, their replacement policy is screw you. That's their replacement policy. If you broke it, they're not going to offer replacement glass. They're not going to offer parts to anybody else to do it. You just have to buy a new one.
Yep.
I'm like, yeah. And I had thought, there's got to be some sort of case for this or something, but surely I won't need it. It's meant for an activity tracker. It's for active people being active. Clearly, they will have made it with some sort of natural protect. No. It still works. I mean, and I hit it right at the very bottom, so it's got this nice little spider web effect at the bottom of the thing. It's just, I'm a little irritated, I gotta say.
All right.
So,
well, now that they're owned by Google, I'm sure they will be all the responsive. Just write to Google. I'm sure you'll hear back.
Yeah. www.wedon'tanswernuttin.com. So yeah.
Well.
Good on me.
Well, anyway, we're into November. Right. It's no longer spooky. Yeah. We'll address last week in a comment, so that'll be fun.
That'll be fine. This is November, which means that it finally cooled down today. This week, it went down to 88.
Yep. Nearing tolerable temperatures for a human like myself.
Well, that's the highest of 88. And high of 88 in Florida is pretty nice.
Low of 86.
Our AC broke. Our AC went out, and the day that it got cool. So I actually opened the door and went, "Hey, it's cooler outside than it is in here." So we opened up all the windows and stuff, and then got the house down to about a frigid 77 at night.
Oh, man.
We were all snuggled up under our comforters and building a fire.
Intolerable.
With flip-flops, because that's what we do with our old flip-flops. We just burn them. Don't worry about those, dude. It's fine. This is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Go to www.avrant.com. Leave us a comment there. Facebook.com/AVRant Podcast. YouTube.com/AVRant. You can reach Rob directly at rob@avrant.com. His Twitter's at First Reflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is at avrant_Tom. My text.
Just came back.
Take a look at it.
All right.
Yeah. So my phone's on the ground. I turned the notifications off on this thing because I don't want it to vibrate while I'm doing this. So I have to actually. I can't just go like this and look like I'm James Bond. Anyways,
technology.
James Bond, circa 1977.
Isn't it making our lives so much better? Oh man.
All right. Let's see here. Let's thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, all you have to do is support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com. Click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link on the top right there. It's got a coffee cup on it. Can't miss it. Sends you to a PayPal donation site where PayPal will take your either PayPal information or credit card information, and they will take some money from you and give it to us, however much you sent. Most of it to us. So we want to thank Steve for doing that last week. Thank you very much, Steve.
Yeah, Steve, thank you for that donation. We appreciate it.
We also want to thank our 88 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon is a service where you can sign up for a monthly subscription. They take a monthly draw from your account and give most of it to us. Well, we want to thank our 88 patrons, including James, our House of Cards listener. So thank you, James.
That's right. That's patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you would like to sign up, thank you very much to our 88 patrons, including James, House of Cards. Yes, which we still go, House of Cards. But anyway, he likes it. And James, a while back, said that he had sent, I believe all three of us, including Lee, Amazon gift cards. But you mentioned you might never have received yours. And he's like, yeah, Tom's might never have been sent. So check your email, Tom. You might have an Amazon gift card.
I got one recently. I got one
but
recently.
that was from someone else.
It was from James.
That was
though.
Vincent.
Yeah, that was from Vincent. Yeah. Okay. I'll check. I just actually went through my email, but he
might not have sent it yet.
Yeah. All right. All right. In the news, let's get to this quickly. I, at the last minute, have been asked to do something. So I have to be there at 12:15, which means I have to leave here at 12, which means we're starting a half an hour early, which means we're ending on time or maybe a little bit earlier than on time because I need to be there. So because it's a drive and I got to take care of this dog who's sleeping comfortably on my couch as we speak. And it looks like she's having little dreams about barking at the dog outside.
That is what they do.
All right. In the news, Netflix will stop working on most devices that came out before 2012. December 1st is the cutoff. And if you're using a smart TV, Blu-ray player, or anything else from before 2012, you'll be shown a warning message when you launch Netflix, letting you know that it won't work after December 1st anymore. So,
yep. I guess that's what happens. We were joking about how Netflix is on everything. It's pretty much on your toaster at this point, but nope.
Not if your toaster was before 2012.
They're getting to the point now where they're like, we can't keep supporting the old tech for whatever reason. They didn't go into major details. They're just like, because of technical limitations.
Got to be with Atmos and HDR and everything else.
Any number of things, codec support.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. There's probably somebody in there. Somebody said, "Listen, okay, how many are we doing? Yeah, okay.
Oh,
what's a good cutoff? Just where we know everything below that will be too old to really do most of the stuff we want to, and everything above it would be at least possible."
But to me, the major one are the TVs themselves, because if you're someone who used the smart apps that are built into your TV and that's how you watch your streaming services and you never got an external box of any kind or whatever, then those are the people who are affected by this because they don't necessarily have an easy option to switch over to. This doesn't affect the video game consoles, like even the ones that were before 20. Does that count 2012? Because PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, I think those are before 2012 at this point. It doesn't affect those. Those will continue to work because they're powerful enough to keep doing whatever Netflix is doing on a technical level. So,
yeah, I like how you said at this point. At this point, they were before 2012. Yeah, as opposed to some other point when they wouldn't have been. I think most people don't know that they have other ways of doing it.
There could be that.
There's a lot of, I think there's a bit of that going on.
But I imagine there are some people who they just have their smart TV. That's what they're using. They don't replace their TV super often. We're only talking 7 years ago. So that's entirely possible to me.
Yeah, could be. I think it's, I mean, I just had a long conversation with my parents where every sentence out of my mouth was, it's just like Netflix. And every question out of their mouth was, but I don't understand how Disney Plus works. It's like Netflix.
It really is.
Well, how do you get it? It's like Netflix.
Yep.
Just same way you get Netflix, the same way you're going to get Disney Plus. So is it going to be on the TV? Yeah. Can you buy the discs? No.
Nope.
You can't buy the discs. My brother, who's autistic and doesn't understand such things, I guess their Lady and the Tramp is going to be a thing. I was at their house watching a football game, and the commercials were non-stop. The game was on Freeform, which apparently is owned by Disney, I guess. I don't know, because that's all it was Disney commercials. And my brother was like, I want to buy the disc. I'm like, you can't buy the disc. It's streaming. knowing Disney, you will someday be able to buy the disc. But if I tell him that someday he'll be able to, then every day between now and the time he can, he will check the internet and then bug my parents about it. So I have to say no. So Sony is shutting down their live TV streaming service, PlayStation Vue, on January 30th, 2020. And a whole lot of people are going to say, wait, they had a streaming service? But yes, they did.
Yep. I mean, some places speculated about how just the name PlayStation Vue made a number of people think it only worked on PlayStations, and they never bothered to check that. No, it works on pretty much any streaming device.
I would have thought, in fact, I did think that.
Right.
I 100%
Not
thought
entirely
that, because
unreasonable.
I didn't care to even. Why would they even brand it that way? It's stupid.
Because they thought PlayStation was a stronger brand for whatever reason.
Then Sony? Right. Because you say PlayStation and people think it runs only on your gaming system. You say Sony and they think it only runs on every other device made by Sony, including TVs, Blu-ray players, DVD players, the PlayStation.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Sure. That marketing person needs to lay off the cocaine. And
in any case, you'll have to choose one of the other multitude of live TV streaming, YouTube Live, Hulu Live TV.
The great culling of streaming services is very far overdue at this point. I think 3. That's the number we need. We need 3, and it's just
Disney's
like
working on it.
the big three TV stations back in the day. The reality is you can handle 3, in my mind at least. I can handle 3 main sources of where of what I do of things, and then I can scroll through other stuff.
Okay.
I can have a couple like minor ones that I sometimes check, but I check 3 things all the time. So it's right now it's Hulu, Netflix, and mostly either Twitch or YouTube.
Ah, yes.
And Amazon Prime, I just keep forgetting it exists. I mean, it's right there.
Nope.
And the little icons right next to all the other icons, and I just nah. And Jack Ryan is just so not that very good. But anyways. So nothing concrete, but Walmart says they're considering selling off Voodoo. Oh, yay. Oh, all you people who purchased Voodoo things. I'm so sorry.
Maybe Disney will buy it. Mad? Why not at this point?
Really, no doubt. One thing that really does make me mad about Voodoo is that there was a time when you would get a disc and it would have multiple ways for you to
redeem the digital code.
Redeem the digital code, and if you chose one, all the other ones you couldn't.
We're now
redeem.
locked out.
So
you get one.
If you chose Voodoo and then Voodoo goes away, you're screwed.
So I mean, they are the largest part of Movies Anywhere is still Voodoo.
Right.
Now that Ultraviolet shut down, you were encouraged to switch everything over to Movies Anywhere, which is owned by Disney. Movies Anywhere is. But Voodoo was still the largest part of that. So, I mean, as they say, nothing concrete, but if Walmart says they're considering, you can bet they're going to continue searching for a buyer of the whole Voodoo thing if they're not interested in running it anymore. So, interesting times for having purchased any digital content.
All right. Meanwhile, via our listener Carl, Warner Brothers, it says that HDMI. Is that what I was going to say? I think HBO Max streaming service is set to launch in May 2020 for $15 a month. Wasn't HBO Go $7 a month?
So let's see. HBO Go was an add-on if you already subscribed to HBO via your cable provider. So it was cheaper. And I think some of them just included it if you already subscribed. But then there was HBO Now, which was the standalone service, which was also $15 a month. Okay.
So if you're already an HBO Now subscriber, you'll get the option to switch over to HBO Max when it launches, but only if you signed up for HBO Now directly through HBO. If you did it through Roku or Apple's aggregated services, you'll have to jump through some more hoops to get HBO Max's bigger content library. If you already subscribe to HBO through AT&T, you'll get HBO Max for free with your continuing cables or satellite subscription. If you subscribe to HBO via a different cable provider as an add-on to Hulu or Amazon Prime Video, the situation is kind of unclear. They haven't said they'll discontinue HBO Go yet, but it looks as though the idea is to eventually get all HBO customers onto an HBO Max subscription in some fashion. So,
And another thing of
Whatever.
branding, I mean, it's HBO Max. That's what's front and center. And yes, people are pretty familiar with HBO, but HBO Max is everything Warner Brothers. So it's all the Warner Brothers own TV shows, all the Warner Brothers own movies, all the DC Comics stuff. Now it's all under HBO Max. So
I saw one episode of The Watchmen.
Yeah, yes.
Or most of one episode when I was out of town. It was, I guess Monday. It comes out Mondays or maybe Sunday nights and replays on Mondays because I was at a hotel room on Monday and they had an HBO and I caught an episode of something and it was, I think, most of the first episode. It was fine.
But again, I mean, this is certainly, there are going to be people who are like, HBO Max, that must be HBO content, right? It's like, no, it's way more than that. And I don't know if the branding communicates that clearly.
I don't even know how to brand that differently, though, because, you know, with
Warner Brothers, just call it
Well,
Warner
I know,
Brothers.
but Warner Brothers doesn't tell me exactly.
And a lot of people don't know that HBO is owned by Warner Brothers, I suppose.
Exactly.
And a lot of people don't know that DC Comics is owned by Warner Brothers. Well, and Warner Brothers is owned by AT&T, and how many people know that?
So I was giving Sony a hard time earlier because of their PlayStation View or whatever it is, but that was a marketing decision from the get-go. This is we had HBO Go, which was just HBO via mobile, which everybody understood, and now we're going to add a bunch of stuff to it. So to rebrand that costs millions. To get to do the big marketing push so that enough people hear about it. And get it out on all different formats so that people can hear it from or learn about it from different ways. That makes it a lot more difficult, but they have to market it somehow. They can't just say HBO Max. They have to tell you all the other stuff or people are going to be like, I don't want it. I was paying $7. Now you want me to pay $15. I don't want it. Well, you can get all this other stuff. Well, I didn't ask for this other stuff. I just want to watch, the reruns of Game
stuff,
of Thrones.
Right,
Yeah. All right, and after reclaiming the streaming rights to Friends and The Big Bang Theory, HBO Max also decided to pay $500 million to secure the streaming rights for South Park. Well, good on the South Park, but the reality is that's a very topical. Know that it ages super well. I've seen it. Like
There's
I
lots of
can
seasons.
stream it on certain things, and I'm like, nah, I don't need it. Them talk about something that was topical 5 years ago.
In any case, it seems like $500 million is just the de facto going rate for a popular TV show with several seasons. The Office was $500 million. Friends was $500 million. Everything's just $500 million. Just throw around that $500 million like candy.
Yeah, and I'm wondering who's getting that $500 million because I bet it's not the actors.
Well, because they were what was Comedy Central is who are they owned by? Viacom, which is owned by CBS, I think.
Yes, yeah.
I think that's how that goes. That's up the ladder. So somebody on Twitter was like, so what does Comedy Central get out of this? Like $500 million. That's what they get out of it. It's not going to be on their streaming service anymore. It's not going to be on CBS All Access anymore. But, well, actually, it's on Hulu at the moment, which is owned by Disney. And wow, this starts getting crazy as to who owns what. Disney doesn't own South Park, so whatever. Now it's going to be on HBO Max starting in May. There you go.
I don't think they wanted to own it. They're like, I'll give you $500 million so it's not on our platform anymore. Too many fart jokes. All right, the new 2019 NVIDIA Shield TV Pro and TV, I guess, is it Shield Tube or TV Pro or TV Tube?
Technically, it's just the Shield TV, which is a tube shape, so everyone just calls it the tube now. And then there's the Shield TV Pro. Okay,
so there's Shield TV and the Shield TV Pro.
Yes.
Okay. So some of our questions have been answered. I didn't know we had any, but here we go. The TV Shield $200 Shield TV Pro can be used as a Plex server. Just the regular TV or the tube version is $150 and remains a great Plex player, but doesn't support being a server. They also added a matched frame rate option in the settings, which is something we have been asking for a long time. But it's marked as beta, and it's not the automatic frame rate switching across all apps that we were hoping for. Apps still have to be written to support it, and it isn't fully automatic. Instead, while a video is playing, you can bring up quick settings and manually change the frame rate there. And lastly, that upgraded Tegra X1 Plus processor still doesn't support Google's VP9 codec on a hardware level. So the new Shield devices do list VP9 codec support now, but only Profile 1, not Profile 2. So YouTube videos can play in 4K resolution now, but not in HDR. Yeah. I mean, this is people filming stuff in there.
Well, no, there's some pretty darn professional or at least semi-professional stuff that's done there. No, I mean, I just find it odd that there is literally not a single standalone box that can stream YouTube in 4K with HDR and 5.1 audio. You can do it through the built-in apps on...
My Fitbit can do it now, though.
Yeah, getting there. No, I mean, there are built-in apps on like LG's OLEDs or on Sony TVs that can do all of that stuff. But yeah, no standalone boxes. And I was thinking, maybe with this update to the Shield TV, runs Android TV, that might finally be the standalone YouTube box to get, but nope, still doesn't do HDR. It is still the only standalone box that does 5.1 audio, and at least it does 4K from YouTube now, but not HDR. And then the frame rate switching thing, I mean, great to see it. It means they're working on it, obviously aware of it, that it's a feature that people do want. I don't know if it might be implemented better than the way the beta is working right now, but this puts it very close to being completely neck and neck with the Apple TV 4K, in my opinion. The Apple TV 4K has the better automatic frame rate switching. It just does it on a hardware level across every single app. So
I just can't believe that this isn't possible.
I know.
For the NVIDIA Shield. I just don't understand. I mean,
and we'll be talking more about the new Shield TVs later. So,
right. All right, let's just go on. We got some comments here. I want to thank you to everyone who said they enjoyed episode 666. Mm-hmm. Tom's Cobra Commander costume was a big hit, but Rob's spooky face paint freaked out at least one loyal viewer, which we have an image here on YouTube. If you're not seeing it, is me on one side and then a paper towel covering Rob, which is how I watch the video.
That is how everyone should watch things. Yeah, there's no reason to look at me without the face.
Honestly, I think you should put the video. I don't know how you would do it, but you need some sort of automatic frame switching thing that switches on when, maybe NVIDIA Shield can do this, switches on when the images pop up and switches off when it's our
I see, yes.
All right, well, that was funny. I mean, he's got a Mac. Yeah, that's funny. All right, let's get to the questions here. I am hot. This room is warming up. And my Ecobee doesn't connect from my computer anymore because I somehow messed up the password. I don't know what it is now.
Isn't your AC busted anyway?
No, we got it fixed. Okay. Sort of. We're getting it replaced. It's on its last legs. We're getting it replaced, but the inside air handler for the AC, there's the outside and the inside unit. The inside unit is directly across the hall from a bathroom that we've been trying for the last 3 months to get redone. And my contractor just called us 2 weeks ago and said, "Oh, something came up and you won't be able to make it till March." And I'm like, yeah, you're kind of fired.
Yep.
So gonna go with somebody else. So now I've got somebody coming on Thursday or Friday, I don't remember which one, to give us another quote, because the other two quotes we didn't like. All right, Luke on Twitter. Luke says, based on recommendations, Luke bought some NHT-C1 bookshelf speakers to use on his computer desktop. They sound great. So he says, thanks for having suggested them, but unfortunately now he wants to replace them. Nothing to do with their sound. It's all down to multiple computer monitor arrangement that he would like to have. And even though the NHT-C1s are fairly compact at 5 3/4 inch wide, they don't quite fit in between the monitors that he would like to position side by side. So what he wants are speakers that are as skinny as possible from side to side. They can be tall, they can be deep, but from side to side, he wants them to be as skinny as they can be. So he says, if sound reproduction is all about surface area and displacing air, shouldn't it be possible to use a whole bunch of tiny drivers in a vertical row rather than just one big cone woofer? Well, very few speakers use just one big cone woofer, except subwoofers.
Well, I mean, he's saying for the woofer that you have,
you're talking about a line array. And yes, It can be done, and it's done all the time. Look at Macintosh line array speakers, and you will see speakers that are 10 feet tall that have 70,000 1-inch tweeters in it. And it's right in the vertical line, and they may be side by side or whatever, or just slightly offset, but there'll be a whole bunch of them. And then they'll have like woofers down, like very small 3-inch woofers or so down right next to them down in another line. And that's a very effective speaker. It's just not very practical for most people because of the space requirements that they require in order to get out enough of the frequency range.
And it does
across any volume.
Using a line array or just using a whole bunch of small drivers to equal the surface area of one or more larger diameter drivers, it does run into an interesting characteristic. It's not inherently good or bad, and in fact, it's sometimes used on purpose, like in large line array speakers. They use this characteristic on purpose, which is that the way sound dispersion works is that as long as the driver that is producing whatever given frequency is smaller in diameter than the wavelength that it is producing, then it will produce that frequency in pretty evenly wide dispersion. It won't beam the sound out directionally. It'll cast it in a very wide dispersion as long as the diameter of the driver is smaller than the wavelength that it's producing. So when you stack a whole bunch of small drivers producing a whole wide range of frequencies, what you end up with is a situation where, let's say they're all stacked vertically, like most line arrays are. Well, from side to side, you'll have very wide dispersion, because side to side is these small drivers producing ever lower and therefore longer wavelength frequencies. But up and down, vertical dispersion wise, now all those drivers are essentially acting as one surface, but it's one tall, skinny surface. So from top to bottom, now all those drivers working together in unison are like one large driver as far as the vertical dimension goes. And therefore, at higher frequencies, it'll start to become very directional. It'll act as though it's beaming the sound forward. So, they use that on purpose in line array speakers so that they are wide dispersion in one direction, but very narrow, limited dispersion in the other. They use them at stadiums and that, so that sound isn't being projected out the roof of the auditorium, but it's all being directed at the audience. They use that to contain the sound. That, just as far as why don't we see that design all the time, why ever use larger drivers? Well, it's because the larger drivers, as long as the frequency is low enough and the wavelength is long enough, will still have even dispersion in every direction. You start stacking drivers vertically all the time or horizontally, and you limit the dispersion in that direction.
Right. And if you go to a stadium, a lot of times what you see, or like an auditorium, you'll see speakers hanging from the ceiling and they'll be bent. Yep. And that's the whole thing, is they're trying to give, it's basically a line array right above you, and they're, of course, they're all horn loaded and everything else. But what you end up having to do is you end up having to have a speaker that's basically floor to ceiling, just to make sure that you're getting that dispersion of the vertical dispersion that you want. Plus, you just need a whole bunch of them to play low. And then a lot of times, especially the Macintosh ones, you're looking at speakers that are full range, so they have to have a bajillion of them anyways. So he says, is there a speaker that sounds just as good as the NHTC ones but is skinnier? I don't know if I've heard the C1s. What are they like, Rob?
Well, so you're familiar with the Super Series, like and the C Series is NHT's top of the line. So still extremely neutral, but extends even higher, up into like 30, 35 kilohertz, because that's one thing. Higher power handling, as you would expect with the flagship series. So those basic things, but still extremely neutral, accurate sound, because it's NHT, and that's what they do.
What you got, Rob?
All right. So, my number one pick as far as sound quality, but in a very skinny compact package, would be Revel's Concerta M8 speakers. These are marketed as their on-wall speakers, but they are their very compact, can be mounted on a wall. They are 4.5 inches wide. So, you're only going from 5 3/4 inches down to 4.5, but if that's what it is and that'll work for you, then I can certainly recommend them on a sound quality level. They go for $300 each, so they are not inexpensive, $600 for a pair. But the thing about them is Revel only claims that they play down to 110 hertz, and that is spot on. You get down to 110 hertz, and then they drop off like a cliff. So there is really not any deep bass extension, but that'd be one. Now, a speaker that is nice and skinny in every dimension, but actually a little bit wider than the Revel Concerta M8s is Golden Ear's SuperSat. Again, they market these as their on-wall speakers, so front to back they're skinny, but he said he didn't really need that. So like the SuperSat 3s, they go for $250 each, $500 for the pair, but they are 4 3/4 inches wide, so that's probably not skinny enough. So if he was looking for something that can play lower than the Revels, is the skinniest of all, and actually the least expensive out of all of these options. I could point you to Polk's S35. Now, this is normally used as a center because they made it so that it's, a not very tall center that can fit below all these TVs that have very low stands these days, but it can be used vertically. There's absolutely no reason. In fact, they say so right on their own website. However, he asked a good question, which is like, what's going to stop these from tipping over? Because they are only 4.1 inches wide, ever so slightly wider than 4 inches. They're $185 each on Amazon, so they're the least expensive. But they don't have like a vertical stand. When they say they can be used vertically, they're mostly talking about wall mounting them because they just have keyhole brackets on the back where you can wall mount them either horizontally or vertically. However, if you were to secure them down with some blue tack museum putty, they'll be pretty much fine.
Well, I guess it depends on what kind of desk he has.
That's
too,
true.
And how he's going to. Yeah. I mean, you could wall mount them.
Possibly.
He could also build like just a base for them to sit in. Just literally, a little bit of plywood and a little one by, and you just essentially sandwich the speaker in that and just give it a wider base.
Yep. Or build some kind of thing with L brackets and you just clamp it in.
Well, I mean, that's what they do with bookshelves, right? That you just take the top and you just clamp that thing in there. So,
but other than going with basically, PC speakers, like Harman Kardon has those super skinny, clear, right? They're see-through, but they don't sound very good. I mean, they just.
Well, I was thinking. I mean, I think Kef has like really thin speakers too, but they're not. I don't think they're this thin.
Not like that. And they're still like 4.5 inches wide, which is thin, but it's not any thinner than the rest of these options.
Yeah, and I think they're a lot more expensive too. But I guess the only other thing that came to my mind was the audio engine, and I don't know that they necessarily would sound better than the NHTs or
they'd be comparable. But are they any skinnier? The audio engines?
I mean, mine are very small. I mean, I don't think they're 4.5 inches wide.
Okay,
I could go out there and measure them right now. That's the.
But I mean, we're not talking like 2 inches wide. We're still talking around 4 inches wide.
Yeah. If you're going for like super skinny, I think you're going to be kind of out of luck. No one really makes that.
Yeah, like I say, there are the PC ones that are like that, but they really don't sound that great. So it's hard to recommend.
Yeah. Aiden.
We just he had one more thing about the Polks there from.
Yeah, you answered that already.
Well, he was just saying the actual sound quality. Since very often we're not like huge fan of Polk overall here. I mean the S35 is. I mean, it's not my favorite speaker in the world, but it's not offensive in any way. I mean, it's the Polk thing. It's pretty down the middle of the road. It has some high frequency roll off, which Polk always does. But he's going to be using them so near field that I don't foresee any issue on the actual sound quality side of those Polks. They'll be surprisingly like they're about 2 feet tall with standing vertical. So they're not tiny at all.
I mean, it's not a bad idea just to like look at center channel speakers and say, I mean, because you're sitting so close, who cares about dispersion?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you could go for the JBL one as well, the JBL Stage one, which is about equal in width and everything else as the Polk here. Although that one has ports on either end, so you can't really stand it vertical because it would be standing on its port. So that's an unusual. Yeah, so the JBL Stage doesn't really work unless you're going to wall mount it. Yeah. You could wall mount it.
But I'm just saying, like, you can think outside the box that way. I think what he really would like is a speaker that's about 2 inches. It sounds this way. 2 inches wide that just has a bunch of tweeters in it.
Well, I think he's thinking of like those Harman Kardon PC speakers, which I would recommend form factor wise if they sounded any good, but they don't.
They don't. Yeah. All right, Aiden. Aiden wants to buy 2 new TVs, and he wants a big jump in picture quality. One of the TVs, well, do we know where he's coming from?
One of them was a plasma.
Big jump from plasma?
Yeah, one of them was a Samsung plasma. The other one, I think he said, is sort of like in a workout room, so that one will probably be pretty easy to get a jump over.
Yeah, okay. All right, Aiden, one of the TVs he wants a 50 inches or smaller. That's got to be the workout one. And the second TV is replacing a 60-inch Samsung Plasma. And he's looking to go larger, so 65 to 75 inches, maybe 88 inches. Who knows? He says there's no OLED option for under 50 inches right now, right?
Correct.
And it seems seems like all of the nice 4K TVs we talk about start at 55. So is there a really nice less than 50-inch option for a 4K TV that supports all the HDR formats? Let me just start off by saying, if this is really going in the workout room, do we really care about HDR?
I think it's
all that
mostly
much?
about that everything will be compatible across both TVs.
Yeah,
I think that's mostly
that
what he's worried about.
and that does make
Mm-hmm.
sense. So if that's why you're concerned about it, then I 100% understand where you're going with. But right now, just anything that you can buy that is newish is going to support everything, because that's where we are in
Except that
this process.
Samsung doesn't support Dolby Vision. So if you're going to be
Right,
worried
but
about,
they don't on any
they don't on
TV,
any
so
other TV. So if you got two Samsungs, then it's fine.
you'll be fine.
Then they will
Yeah,
both support the same things, including HDR10 Plus, which is in North America, they're almost the only game in town for that. Because in Europe,
Right.
you've got their version of Philips, which is different than the US version of Philips. They're two separate companies. They're just licensing the Philips name. So over in Europe, you got Philips and you have Panasonic, who are supporting HDR10 Plus, but neither of them are selling those TVs in in the States. You can get Panasonic TVs in Canada. So anyway, HDR10 Plus is what Samsung is doing. Everybody else is doing Dolby Vision. So as far as TVs under 50 inches, there are two pretty darn good options. Both of them are 49 inches. But for $900, you could get Sony's X900F. Now that is from a year ago, so those are starting to sell out, but they can definitely still be found. Like Best Buy still has them. Although the 55-inch one is only $100 more at $1,000. So
It very well may be a space issue.
it could. I think it is.
Yeah,
So
like a cubby's been built for it,
Yeah.
and he's stuck
and the
with that.
49-incher is still less expensive. It's $100 less expensive, and it's 49 inches. So
Yeah.
X900F, that'll do Dolby Vision. It'll do HDR10. So if you get one, then you're worried about Dolby Vision support. The X900F from Sony will do it. And then Samsung, they have a 49-inch version of the Q70. So it's the Q70 series, which is still full array local dimming. The X900F is too. Normally, the Q70 and the 49-inch size goes for $1,000, but it's on sale right now as we're recording this for $800. So there you go. Do you want Dolby Vision or do you want HDR10 Plus? Because that basically decides whether it's the Sony or the Samsung for you.
And for the big TV, what are our top recommendations these days for something in the 65 to 75 inch size, LCD and OLEDs, please? We talked about all this last week. I feel like we did a lot of this last week.
But
so
those were mostly value options, and now
were they really? No, I thought we had somebody who was going for I don't care how big it is. How much
I recall most of them looking at like the $2,000 price range. So what I did here was go for the 75-inch size, because I'm like, you know what? You said you wanted the big upgrade, and that includes size to me. And some of these are very reasonably priced for a 75-inch excellent television. So I'll go from the most expensive and what I think is the best downwards. So LG's C9 OLED, of course, 77 inches. You can get for $4,000 these days. Best Buy has it at $5,000 right now, but you don't have to look very hard to get them at $4,000, which is pretty amazing. They came out, they were $10,000 when they first came out. So that's a pretty good price drop within a year. Now, the LCD that will come closest to OLED performance is going to be Samsung's Q90. I don't think it is completely the equal of OLED, and I've mentioned last week how I don't like how Samsung doesn't give you a completely accurate HDR10 mode, although it's not the end of the world. It's just a little bit brighter than technically it should be. But $3,500 will snag you the 75-incher of Samsung's Q90. So then we start going, okay, well, what could we get at the same size for a little bit less? Vizio's P Quantum X, their flagship, $2,700 for the 75-inch size. More local dimming zones than anyone other than the Samsung Q90. But it's that whole thing where the uniformity of the panels is not quite as good on Vizio's as it is on Samsung's. That's largely the price difference there. And then you're going down in the lineups. Samsung Q80 comes in at $2,300. Samsung's Q70 comes in at $2,000 even. Sony's X900F is still out there for also $2,000. And Vizio's P-Series Quantum, not Quantum X, but Quantum, is down at $1,600. So once you're looking at that type of price range at 75 inches, I'm like, you have no reason to consider 65 inches anymore. Unless you just really want the OLED and not for $4,000.
Right. Well, I guess there's older OLEDs too. You could also be considering.
Although the brand new ones barely cost any more than the last year's at this point. So right around the $2,000 mark, you could get a 65-inch OLED. So, I mean, you coming from a plasma, I kind of want you to get an OLED. So,
yeah, it's really I don't think that you're going to get a huge upgrade in picture other than the HDR,
well, yeah,
which would
it's
be good.
4K and HDR.
But
That's not nothing to sneeze
the
at.
size, I think, is what you really need to focus on. I
But I
think
mean,
that because
argument
plasma
can be made
just
for a
looks fantastic.
65-inch OLED. He's coming from a 60-inch, so it is still bigger.
It's still bigger. Yeah. And Infinite Gary. On a recent episode of the CDIA Tech Council podcast, boy, that sounds terminally boring, but okay. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's the most exciting
It's
thing ever.
pretty
And
good. I
it's
like that podcast.
Yeah. Council podcast, though. Council. It sounds like
Well, they're the Tech Council. In
yeah.
fact, I think they just removed that and call it the CDIA podcast now.
There you go. It sounds more exciting now. They talked about the latest meeting of the Audio Engineering Society and how Atmos was everywhere, particularly as a music format now. There seems to be a concerted effort to make Atmos music into a thing, where surround sound music via SACD and DVD audio has largely failed. It was pointed out that all of the discussion was focused on streaming music services. There wasn't a single mention of a physical disc format. And of course, Amazon's new Music HD service with its support of Atmos was a big talking point, but some concerns were raised, particularly around translatability. How will these new Atmos music mixes sound on Amazon's Echo Studio versus an Atmos soundbar versus a full Atmos home theater? And of interest to Gary, they talk about how some AES members, Sean Olive's name was dropped, are concerned that because Atmos has been all about cinema audio up until now, many audio engineers think the Cinema X curve should always be applied to Atmos mixes. Should we be worried about the X curve when it comes to Atmos music? There's a lot of things to be concerned of when you talk about surround sound music.
Yeah.
So we've SACD and DVD audio, but mostly SACD was just a music format. There was, at best, an image on the screen if
Right.
there was any image at all. So the music was recorded solely to be in surround sound, and it was mixed that way. But when you got to DVD audio and DTS mixes, because there was DTS audio, I mean, they didn't call it that, but they called it DTS something, music mixes as well, there were oftentimes moving images, or I have Blu-ray discs that are, Diana Krall and the Blue Man Group and other things that are live.
Well, those are like, actual concerts. I mean, there were certainly DVD audio releases that were just audio, no video on it at all.
Yes.
Those did exist, but yeah, you could have the mix.
So when we're talking about the X curve, I'm not going to address that right now. I'll let Rob get more technical into that, and then we'll come back to it. But the reality is when we start talking about Atmos and these mixes, there's so many things going on as far as how it is mixed, and what is the intent. If the intent is just to make a surround mix as you would hear it in a like a venue, well, then what you end up with is basically it's sounding very much like a stereo mix with a little bit of ambient sound around you. There's very little almost reason to have the mix. If you're looking at something like Porcupine Tree, who they do a ton of mixing, which they actually move things around for I guess artistic reasons or whatever. Well, that's something a little bit different. But when you're talking about like a studio, not a studio, but like a live performance and that sort of stuff, where there's moving images going along with it at the same time, you suddenly run into this issue. And I had a disc that I reviewed, which was a long time ago. It was just a DVD, I believe, not DVD-A, but just DVD. The music video. And what they did is they anchored the guitarist in the left, like the right speaker, the bassist in the left speaker, the drummer and the singer up front, and then no matter what image you were looking at, that's where the music would be coming from. So it's, if they focused in on the guitarist, he was still coming out of the right speaker, even though you were looking right at him. So it ends up, as far as from a mixing standpoint, how do you solve that problem? Do you, where the camera is that how the music is mixed? Is that going to be distracting to people? Are you just going to anchor things and then let the camera do whatever the heck it wants? And if you're doing a studio recording, what's the intention here? If the intention is make it sound like I'm in a club listening to Diana Krall. Well, I don't really need Atmos for that, like at all.
I think the bigger thing that's going on here, and this is always what gets conflated when people just use the term Atmos. I mean, good on Dolby because they've managed to make Atmos into sort of the de facto name thing that people know now. But really, and honestly, the Cedia podcast didn't even address this part of it, but it's the part that I think is important, which is that this isn't about Atmos. Let's put that out of our heads. It's about the transition of channel-based mixes to object-based mixes. That's what's going on. And moving everything over to object-based mixing makes all the sense in the world to me. And they did point out how, what if you want to start doing some of this stuff in 360-degree videos? What if you want to start doing some of this stuff in virtual reality or augmented reality?
Well, that's where it makes. I mean,
it makes all the sense in the world to use objects there, not channels, right?
Yes, objects make the most sense when you're talking about VR. When you're getting into VR so that you can move your head, that's when you want to have, the channels. Absolutely, you can't have channels, unless you're physically, in video games are the same way, right? Yeah. When you turn your character, you want to know that the gunshots or the cries for help are coming from in front of you or behind you. You don't care what channel they're supposed to come out of. You want it to be more object based. So it makes the most sense for me there. But and transferring it, you still have to decide. When you're placing that object in that 360-degree space, when you're placing that object there, you still have to decide whether or not what you're actually doing with the music. What's the why would something be moving around or not moving around?
Yeah, and I mean they talked about how they had some demos. I mean these were just demo things to show these are possibilities. This is something that could be done, but they actually had like an interactive space where you do not have a fixed listening position. So by using a fully immersive audio sound mix with objects, and you can even start getting into motion tracking or head movement tracking and stuff like that, but you might not be sitting in a chair in a fixed position. You might be moving around the room as though you are walking amongst the musicians on stage, that type of thing, which is something that even in surround channel mixing starts to get difficult. So it's interesting stuff, and I think the transition over to object-based mixing for essentially everything that we do is what really has the engineers excited, because it makes so much sense for so many applications, and there's no reason why you can't still play it through a traditional 2 speakers, right? As long as the rendering engine is always able to collapse it down to however many speakers you do have, there's not any reason to avoid using object-based mixing. So that's really what it's all about. But as far as the X-curve goes, the X-curve is a weird thing, because the people who insist on still using the X-curve when it comes to setting up an actual cinema, they will tell you over and over that it is not a target curve. It is not an equalization curve. It is the result of essentially old and not very good measurement practices, because the X-curve is what happens when you actually use very neutral speakers, very linear speakers, but then you put them into a gigantic full-sized, like we're talking, 500, 600 seat theater or larger. You actually fill those seats with either real people, or when they're doing the measurements, like, dummy bodies. They usually fill up like 1/3 of the theater with dummy bodies. And then you use a real-time analyzer to look at the frequency spectrum from pink noise being played under those conditions. And when you do that, and a real-time analyzer is not a great way to measure that, which is why it's sort of antiquated, but that's what they had when they came up with this. And when you did all that, you would end up with a frequency response that looks like the X-curve, which essentially is just a high-frequency roll-off. So what most engineers these days are saying is this was coming from supposedly linear speakers. So let's not worry about, and it only applies in very large rooms with many bodies in them, and only when you're looking at a real-time analyzer looking at pink noise being generated. So if you did this through even a fast Fourier transform, it wouldn't look like the X-curve anymore, because you wouldn't have the anomaly that comes from looking at it on a real-time analyzer, which doesn't give you a terribly accurate representation of the actual frequency response. So most engineers, I think, now sort of agree, like if you're doing this in a small space, a mixed studio, something that's meant to replicate a home environment, absolutely do not worry about the X curve. A lot of movies are not made with the X curve anymore, although many are. So it's a weird thing that hopefully will get past at some point because it's based on antiquated measurement.
Well, the concern that once we switch to a new technology, there's going to be people who are going to do it wrong is not just valid; it's going to happen,
and it will be the case.
Okay.
I mean, it's going to be a lot
Ragnarok,
of growing
okay?
pains. A lot of growing pains.
Thor Ragnarok. If you need to look any further than that, I mean, there's just it's just the way what's going to happen. There's going to be some things that are going to be messed up, but that is no reason to not do the thing.
I don't see us.
It seems to be the battle cry of the people who want to stay in the past. Oh no, 2 channels is all we need.
Right.
So because if we switch this and people are going to screw it up, well,
no,
so
I don't see any way that we do not move towards object-based audio. It just makes too much sense for us to avoid it.
All right. Second question. Andrew Jones introduced the new ELAC Carina series of speakers, which are his first designs to use ELAC's jet folded ribbon tweeter. They're $850 for a center, $1,200 a pair for the bookshelves, and $2,400 a pair for the tower. That's an upside down dog. They all use either 1 or 2 5.25-inch aluminum woofers, and they were all ported designs. Audio Advisor posted a video in which Andrew Jones explains his designs, and Gary keyed in on his comments about the port placement. The center uses a pair of large flared ports on the back, but the bookshelf and towers have a port facing downward with an angled cutout on the bottom of the speaker to let air escape. Andrew mentions how his first ELAC designs used rear ports, but people always ask about how close they could put the speaker to the wall. So with the debut 2.0 series, he put the port on the front, but he says that there are good and bad trade-offs no matter where you put the port. So with the Carina series, he split the difference and went with downward-facing ports. You don't get the direct noises from the vent coming towards you, is the quote that Gary has given us. Noises? What noises is he talking about? Gary never noticed any noises from his ported speakers. Is this a cause for concern? You actually, when you're measuring speakers that have ports, you're supposed to measure the noise that comes out of the port too. And when we say noise, we mean music.
Sound.
It is part of it.
He was speaking very casually, and he could have replaced the word noises with sounds. Yeah. Right.
And I mean, it's a tuned port. Okay. That's the thing to remember. It's tuned so that when the air comes out of it, it comes out at specific frequency or frequencies. So it is designed to add to the sound that you're getting. When you're measuring subwoofers, you're actually supposed to, do a bunch of stuff that you measure the sound coming directly from the driver, and then you measure the sound coming from the port, and then if the port's in the back or whatever, and then you add it together in ways that involve math. So this is nothing, no cause for concern.
Absolutely not. No, he's not saying that somehow he designed these new Carina series speakers that produce noises that shouldn't be there, and the only way to not hear them is to aim the port away from you. No, it's just a word choice. He could have simply used the word sounds instead, which might not have raised so much concern for you, Gary. But I mean, he's absolutely right, which is that no matter where you put the port, or even if you make the speaker sealed, there are trade-offs no matter what design you choose. So he's decided to go with this for now, and
I like this. I mean, if you look at the design, I like it. It's got like a little angle up at the back, and then like a stand. It's almost a stand.
It's like it's standing on a high heel.
It's exactly right. And then the port kind of the angle lets the air out from basically three of the 4 directions. And I like it. I think it's a neat little design. I've never seen anything like it before, exactly, other than in subwoofers. And I think it's a good solution. It does. I mean, I swear, as a speaker designer, you must sometimes just design a speaker with the idea of, I just don't want to answer this question anymore.
There can be that.
I think that's why that's why we see like tweeters who get real popular, like the folded ribbons and that sort of stuff, which are folded ribbons are really hot right now. Then there was ring radiators for a while, and there was aluminum domes. Everybody had aluminum domes.
Beryllium.
And silk domes.
Beryllium is popular if you can afford it.
For a bit. So I think one of the reasons that we see so many speaker manufacturers going with them is like, I'm sick of people asking me if I'm ever going to make a speaker with a folded ribbon.
No, Andrew Jones had a great anecdote one time, which is he made a speaker that was self-powered, like it had the amplification built into it, and he purposely, had the amplifiers and the drivers engineered together so that they would, maximize the efficiency of the current draw. And it was, a Class D amplifier, as you would expect, built into a speaker, but, did all the design, everything. He said he had all these audiophiles come in and listen. Almost all of them exclaimed how this was like the best speaker they had ever heard. And then every single one of them asked, but could I replace it with such and such an amp? Could I instead drive it from these amps instead? He's like, you just said that this thing together was the best thing you ever heard. Why do you need to change it now?
Because I spent $17,000 on these amps.
Because they just believe such and such an amp is the better all by itself, no matter what it's attached to.
And it'll be like a veil is lifted. Oh my God! I read a review on Audioholics recently where the last line of it was like a veil was lifted. I was like, did they say veil was lifted sacrilege. On Audioholics? It is sacrilege. That was one of the things. That was one of the phrases that we searched for and made sure that never got through our reviews. But apparently the editorial process has missed that one this time. All right, next we've got Matt and Carl and Chris apparently. So a bunch of them in there. So with the release of the new 2019 NVIDIA Shield TV Pro and the Tube version, the exciting new feature most reviewers are focusing on is the AI upscaling. And NVIDIA says they took native 4K images, then lower resolution versions of the same images, and fed them into their machine learning program to teach it what was lost in the lower resolution versions. That way, instead of traditional upscaling that just interpolates in between adjacent pixels, or something like Sony's reality creation that references a database of common images and objects, NVIDIA's AI upscaling does a better job, they claim, of making HD images look more like their 4K counterparts. Matt, Carl, Chris would like to know our opinions on NVIDIA's approach to upscaling. Everybody's got an approach to upscaling.
I mean, it's a very logical approach. It's saying we've got two identical images.
Skynet's going to need this when they're trying to look at us through all the CCTV cameras around the world. Yeah, I mean, you're right. We talk about Odyssey and how they took they had the normal curve. That the Fletcher-Munson curves that they were Fletcher-Munson curves that they were using, and then they took real human beings, who were audio engineers, and then had them adjust, and then came up with their own curve based on it. We look at that and say, wow, okay, that makes a lot of sense. This makes a lot of sense too. But going from HD to 4K doesn't require all that much computational.
Well, not from 1080p to Ultra HD. Yeah, it's probably not the most complicated. Yeah. And I mean, as has been pointed out, and NVIDIA, says this right in their own specs, the AI upscaling is not available for standard definition images. It'll only work with high definition images. And they said they trained it mostly on fairly modern TV show and movie images. So if this is the, HD release of some much older movie or very obscure content, very strange images that they haven't had a chance to feed into their
anything by David Lynch
haven't fed it into their machine learning program yet. It might not do any greater job than something that's just interpolating in between the existing pixels. So, I'm not against this. I'm not against it at all. Could it lead to some artifacts here and there? Yes, it could, but so does every form of upscaling. Every form of upscaling, even the simplest that just it says, here's a pixel that's bright red and here's a pixel that's a little bit dimmer red. So it makes sense that there's a pixel in between that is, halfway between those two values, but still red. That's the most basic form of upscaling. Even that can produce artifacts once in a while. It doesn't get it right every single time. So, I mean, you can also turn it off if you want to. So I have no beef with this whatsoever. I think the approach makes a lot of sense, and this is continuing. They always update. There's frequent firmware updates, and they will continue feeding their machine learning program with a larger sample of images. It'll only continue to get better and better. So I'm for this.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, it's just if this doesn't scream marketing to you, then it should, because it's. I mean, they are actually doing a thing, but I mean, there's like one dude over there working on it, and he's only doing it part time. I mean, it's not really. He's like, hey, I can write this program that's going to look at all this stuff and do it. You want me to do it? The marketing guys,
NVIDIA is a graphics card company. This can be applied to other things as well. So I think it's worth it on their end to do this.
It's fine.
Render
really...
your video game at a lower resolution, but the upscaling is so good that you don't realize that it's not being natively rendered at 4K. Or like, how are we going to get to 8K games? How are we going to do it? Well, if you have really good upscaling where you can't even tell, let's do it.
No one needs 8K games, but whatever. Once again, we've got a situation where the TV itself could handle the task of upscaling all incoming signals to 4K resolution, or the AV receiver could upscale every source, or the source itself could send out a 4K resolution to begin with, having upscaled all source material before sending it out. So what's our opinion on when it is appropriate to use each of these options? If you've got one that's better than the rest, that's the one you use. That's literally the answer to this question, and it's always been the answer to this question. The reality is, and it will not be very long before 4K is in the same boat. It's not going to matter, and the source normally is the one that does it just fine.
I mean, the default is if you left all your sources, like let's say you've only got HD sources, and you left all your HD sources outputting HD, and you left your AV receiver just passing it through and not touching it. Well, the default is your TV is going to upscale it to its native resolution no matter what. So there's your default. Now, you could, of course, then choose, like let's say you've got a much lower end television, some of which don't, and I'm not even talking TCL or Vizio, I'm talking, your Westinghouse, your, RCA brand, those type of things. A lot of those have really bad upscalers in them. And it might be quite easy to tell you're just feeding your 1080p Blu-ray player into your AV receiver. You go ahead and turn on your AV receiver's upscaling, and it clearly looks better than if you just let it pass through and let the TV's really crappy upscaling do it, right? That could be the case, and it's pretty easy to tell. So you say, okay, well, now my default is that I'm going to have the AV receiver's upscaling turned on in that scenario. But then you get something like this NVIDIA Shield that, by all accounts, does really excellent 4K upscaling as long as the source was HD to begin with. And you might say, okay, well, for that, I'm going to let it output 4K. The AV receiver, even set to upscale to 4K, isn't going to touch it because it's already 4K. And the TV isn't going to touch it because it's already 4K. So it's basically a matter of you only have to figure out, does my TV or does my AV receiver do a better job of upscaling? In most cases, it's going to be the TV does either just as good or better, so there's not really any reason to turn on the processing in your AV receiver. But if you have a really cheap TV with a really crappy upscaling, maybe your AV receiver, you do turn it on. And then it's just you go source by source. And then when you find a source that does particularly good upscaling, you let it upscale, and now everything passes it through.
Yeah. I mean, most of the times, this is just with me, most of the time I just have the source to it. If you do 5 minutes of research online of upscalers within each of your devices, the receiver is a device that does a lot of things. It does. So are they putting a lot of money into the upscalers? Maybe. Depends on what level of AV receiver you bought, but probably not. Whereas the source really does just the one thing. So if they're going to put money into upscalers, it's going to be either there or in the TV. But not
always. I mean, some of those little sticks, streaming sticks, they don't have fantastic upscalers in them.
Yeah, that's the truth. Yeah. So, there you go. So a lot of professional TV reviewers and calibration experts recommend turning off all picture processing and enhancement features. So where does something like NVIDIA's AI upscaling fall within that sort of recommendation? If it's a lower resolution source, something has to upscale at some point, right? But is AI upscaling more than just upscaling? Does it fall into picture enhancement territory? Will the reviewers and purists be saying to turn it off? Although who cares what those people say? This is not the same as an
no, because this isn't edge enhancement. This isn't contrast manipulation. This isn't trying
to picture interpolation and that sort of stuff. We're not. It's not really trying to change or make the image better. It's not trying to take an SD image and make it HDR. It's not trying to do that. Yeah. What it's trying to do is take, a picture that is, 1080p and make it into 4K. And that has to happen
somewhere. And if it actually does a better job because it's comparing it to the 4K version of a very similar image to that, and it's going, well, through machine learning, we worked out here's what's actually missing pixel-wise. Yeah, I don't think this falls into the same cat. It certainly doesn't fall into the same category as like, motion smoothing or edge enhancement or dynamic contrast or something. It's none of those type of things, all of which I do still say turn those things off.
What was that mosquito?
Noise reduction, something like that. Yeah. But I mean, we've got these in-betweeners things now too, like, banding reduction, right? What's the name that they give that thing? Anyway, contouring, the contouring filter, where I'm like, yeah, technically that's an edge enhancement, but it's to counteract, something that shouldn't be in the image, an artifact in the image. And I'm quite all right with doing that. So I think turning on this AI upscaling and giving it a chance is perfectly fine.
So how does AI upscaling compare and contrast with audio upmixing such as Dolby Surround Upmixer and DTS Neural X? The same reviewers and calibration experts that recommend turning off all picture enhancements never seem to have any problem with using audio upmixing. So why is it bad to enhance video but fine to enhance audio? I don't think you're reading the same people I'm reading. I don't know. I mean, Gene De La Salle over Audioholics is one of the few audio reviewers I've ever read that will on the regular take a 2-channel source and use Dolby Pro Logic as far back as Dolby Pro Logic to send it around his room and then review the album in that way. He's one of the few people I've ever heard do that. Most audio reviewers will not turn on any sort of upmixing. But this does in many ways is analogous to audio upmixing is analogous to scaling. It is, you're taking something that's supposed to be this size and you're putting it in a bigger, you're trying to make it fit into a bigger container. You're taking something that's 1080p, trying to make it 4K or 8K or 16K or whatever. Now you're taking a 2-channel source and trying to put it into all of your speakers in your home theater. So if that's the case, well, it is analogous to that. And for some people, they're not going to want to do that because of reasons. And for other people, they are going to want to do it for reasons. And in both cases, it's still using algorithms or, some sort of processing to say, okay, this sound, because of these variables, is actually supposed to be coming out of this speaker at this volume or these two speakers. Right. So therefore, I will, using my computer brain, I will put it over here instead of having it come out of the front left speaker and a little bit out of the front right speaker.
I mean, I think part of the, why some people are willing to say that enhancing the video, and again, we're talking like motion interpolation or dynamic contrast, that type of thing, willing to say that's outright bad, is because we have very strict measurable standards for video. We can say this is exactly what the colors is supposed to be, exactly what the light level is supposed to be, exactly what the contrast and all of these things are supposed to be, and we can objectively tell whether that's being messed with or not. So if your goal is to say, well, these are the standards and we want to stick to them, then any of these enhancements are moving you away from that, and therefore we don't want to do it. But audio doesn't have those strict standards, and that's why it's easier to say, well, what is this supposed to sound like? Is it really only supposed to sound like it's coming out of 2 speakers, which doesn't actually recreate the original, performance? Or we use some upmixing and it sounds more like I'm at the actual venue now, but technically that wasn't the signal, so is it bad? Well, we don't have standards for that. So,
and TVs are completely different. TVs are in that it is you do not have an option, at least I haven't seen an option on a display that says, show me the image scaled the way that it came to you. There is no put a 1080p image in the center of a 4K display option. It doesn't exist.
There is on mastering monitors, but not for a TV, consumer TV display.
Not for a TV. So so you don't have the flexibility that you have with speakers. With speakers, you have the option. It's not like the speakers say, there are 11 speakers and 2 subwoofers in this room. We all have to be used at all times. So if you don't give us a signal, we're going to split it out ourselves. It doesn't, you have the option of not doing that, which is why it's a little bit easier on the audio side to say you have a choice. On the video side, you
something's got to scale.
You don't have a choice. It's getting scaled. That choice is out of your hands unless you've paid $30,000 for a 20-inch, Sony, mixing, mastering monitor.
It's bigger than 20.
Ooh, fancy. Talk dirty to me, Rob. All right, Mike. Mike is finding himself getting frustrated with Plex. He took great care to make sure he retained full video quality and lossless audio whenever possible. And now that he also has 4K video files, he's making sure to retain HDR. He bought an NVIDIA Shield specifically for its ability to pass through all of the highest video quality video and audio formats. But one of the main reasons he organized his entire content library into Plex was its promised ability to play any file to any Plex client on any supported device. Mike's frustration is that the maximum capabilities of each device aren't being used. The Xbox One in particular. Dun, dun, dun.
Yes. I hear you, Mike.
Microsoft. You just suck so bad.
Well, they didn't write the Plex app. It's not Microsoft's fault. They didn't make the Plex app.
I still blame Microsoft. In the Xbox One Plex app, no matter what, the Plex server transcodes the audio into Dolby Digital 5.1. Obviously, the Xbox One is capable of outputting more than that, but there is no choice. Then on every Plex playback device that does not handle HDR, his 4K HDR files technically play, but it doesn't seem to be any HDR to SDR conversion or tone mapping going on. Everything looks blown out and overexposed. So he went to the trouble of making sure he has both the 4K HDR file and the 1080p SDR file in his Plex library, but the user interface merges them into one massive file.
Well, not one massive file, but you get one title in the user interface. Yep.
And you have to press a bunch of buttons to manually select which version you want to play. It seems as though the only way to separate them would be to create a completely separate Plex library. Can't you put like V1, V2 at the end of the name?
Well, I'll get into that. We'll finish the question, and I'll get into that a little bit.
So is this going to be improved? Netflix is everywhere. Not for long. 2012, baby.
Yeah, right.
You guys all. And they seem to do a great job of always playing the highest quality version of whatever device on that whatever device you're using can support. If they can do it and Voodoo can do it, why can't Plex? All right, you answered that. I'm going to go turn on my AC. I am.
Alrighty, so I wanted to address the bit of the user interface and your Plex library thing because, yes, if you have the same title, you take one movie and you have both the 4K HDR version and the 1080p SDR version, but it's the same movie title, then yes, you will see one movie poster in your Plex library. You can click on that. You can go over to the three dots and select which version you want to play, and it doesn't really clearly label it. It just sort of gives you the bit rate, and you can obviously guess that the 4K bit rate is going to be higher, but you sort of have to deduce that. So it's not the most user friendly. Like, if this isn't you, the person who set up the Plex server, this is just a family member, that might not always be super clear to them. It's certainly not intuitive and obvious for anyone doing that. But what you can do is in your Plex server, and you would basically have to do this in the web interface, you can rewrite the metadata for every single file in your Plex library. So it could be as simple as, like Tom suggested, you have one that's just labeled in the title 1080p SDR, and the other one is labeled 4K HDR, and now after editing that metadata, they will show up as two separate movie posters. It'll be the same image, although you can change that. You can manually change what image shows up for the movie poster, but you will have two versions of it now, and if you
Dude, that was right. You gotta be kidding me.
If you name it however you want. But I mean, again, that's not super intuitive. The changing of the metadata within the web interface, unless you're specifically looking for it, you might have no idea, because otherwise it just imports all that metadata automatically, which is convenient, but you do have the option to change it all manually. So that is one potential solution for you, because then it'll be clear, okay, I'm on a device I know can't do HDR correctly, so I'll go ahead and play the 1080p version, and now it has its own movie poster, and I just select it and play it, and there it is. I can give it whatever title I want. But as far as why doesn't it just automatically detect, I'm on this device, this is what it can do, and I'm going to give it the best. I mean, it's all down to they have to engineer what the Plex server will transcode every file into for every playback client that they have. And honestly, Plex is a small team. They focus on the biggest platforms first. They've been going through a lot of updates and changes lately, and very honestly and simply haven't gotten around to it on every device. And, they look at which devices are being used the most. The ones down at the end of the list, they might never get updated. That might just be the end of it. If they had a much larger team, they could get to all of these things. I mean, they've spread themselves a bit too thin, if I'm being honest.
They'll probably work on the PlayStation 5 interface
there
right
could
now.
be that, but I mean, they're going to focus on the platforms that the most people are using. That's as simple as, or if there's somebody out there willing to pay them to do it and keep it updated, which I think LG is, because it makes no sense that the WebOS app is actually darn good. But so yeah, I mean, that's sort of I don't know what else. What alternative is there? I mean, I know there's MB, I know there's Kodi and that, but as far as just having one library and one server that then gets transcoded out nicely to mobile devices, streaming boxes, built-in apps on your TV, game players, like everything over the internet, you're outside on LTE and it still works. Like, nobody else's system does it, as certainly not as easily as Plex. I know there's all types of plugins and stuff you can do to hack Kodi to do it, but it's not nearly as easy as just installing Plex and it does it. So I think really your best option is to get into manually changing your metadata. I know that's more work for you, but it'll help there. Now, as far as, are they suddenly going to start playing in lossless on your Xbox One? Nope. There's nothing you can do about that, and until they get around to updating the app, there's nothing that's going to happen there either.
That stinks. All right, Carl. Carl says the new $250 Apple AirPods Pros are out. What do we think? Do we still hate them? Yes.
So
I hate them. I hate them a lot.
I mean, I've been seeing the reviews. Everything seems very reasonable. I say good on them for a number of things that they did. All right, so they're no longer just earbuds. They actually are in ears with a proper sealing silicone tip. Great, good.
Yep.
They've added, by all accounts, excellent active noise cancellation, right up there with what Bose and Sony are doing, and good on them. That'll help. That hopefully people will play their music a little bit quieter because it's easier to overcome the background noise. There's a good pass-through feature. You just press and hold the thing, and you don't have to actually take them out of your ears. You can hear the outside world. Okay, that's good. You can do that within the control on your iPhone. Okay, that's good. I mean, there's lots of good stuff about these. Everyone has said, do they sound good? They're like, they sound fine. That's been every reviewer's thing. So I'm like, yeah, no surprise there. But I don't know if this is the case anymore. I imagine it is. They're vented. They are still vented. They are not a sealed earbud. And
I don't really care that much about that. I care for the same reason I'm mad at Fitbit. I'm mad at Apple for these AirPods because they are designed to be locked.
Oh, yes. Well, yeah.
100%. These things they're like, no, I'm not putting a wire. People are like, oh,
they
it doesn't have a wire.
Entirely wireless, and yes, if they come out of your ear, which everyone has said they fit more securely in your ear because they actually have a sealing tip now, so maybe they won't fall out quite so easily. No, but my biggest problem with AirPods, because you know what? I mean, I can't convince people to actually listen to earphones that sound good. That's on them. But what I hated was that I am standing next to you. I don't want to hear whatever it is you're listening to, and every bit as much sound is coming out of them towards me as is going into your ears, at least with the original AirPods and the second version of the AirPods. Now, these are still vented. I don't know how much sound leaks out of these. If it's an amount that I can hear when I'm standing next to you, then I still hate them, because I hate any type of earphone that leaks its sound out. But with the active noise canceling, hopefully that means people will have the volume not quite as crazy loud with the better bass, because they're an actual sealed ear tip design. Maybe people won't have their volume quite as loud. So if it reduces how much sound leaks out, then I will love them, because that's real. I will never use them, but all I care about is how much they bother me when everyone else is wearing them.
So let's talk about earphones for a second here. So I don't know if you know this, but I live in Florida. And it gets a little warm here. And so I see people running, which is ridiculous. I would never run outside or at all in Florida, given the option. And so they're out there running. And I see couples, and they're running together, and they're both wearing headphones. Sure. And one of them's wearing headphones that are the size of my headphones. And I think to myself, how are you wearing? First of all, how are they not falling off your head? Not just from the jiggling. But second, you're running together as a couple. How do you interact and talk, or at least say, hey, don't run into the street. There's a car and he's not stopping, with these headphones on that are closed back and over ear and everything else. I'm like,
well, they're probably Beats and the batteries are probably dead. So that's probably how that's working. It's just about fashion.
It's just about fashion. Fashion while you're running, whatever. Lee Overstreet. Lee's cousin asked him for some home theater recommendation. Lee's cousin, listen, you need a subwoofer or
It's
two,
getting there.
preferably two.
That's gonna
Don't
come
listen
up.
to Lee. Don't listen to Lee.
Oh, he's
listen to us.
recommended them a subwoofer. Don't worry.
This will be their first home theater they'll be putting in their basement, which still has an unfinished ceiling, and they don't intend to fully finish the room before they begin watching TV and movies and playing games down there. So I guess they'll be sitting on the dirt ground. The overall dimensions are 25 feet wide by 23.5 feet long, and there's a staircase, excuse me, and a utility room in the middle.
Well, middle of the back.
So the available space,
it's not the very middle. Yeah.
Well, I'm just reading what it says here. So the available space is basically a U shape. The bottoms of the exposed ceiling joists are 8.5 inches feet above the floor. So even if when the ceiling gets finished, it could be at least 8 feet high, maybe a little bit more. There's a little under 5,000 cubic feet of air, and there is a door at the top of the stairs. Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
Yay. It's got a lot of stuff down there right now.
Oh, yes. That'll be getting cleared.
All right, it looks like it was... Yeah, it's got to get cleared out. It's got some exercise room, some whatever. Is that tape on the wall to show where the TV is going to go? That is too small. Let's go. Oh, they want a 75-inch TV right in the middle of the 25-foot wall, so basically straight ahead of the stairs. They plan on having the couch roughly 9 feet from the TV. They have between $2,000 and $3,000 to spend, and Lee has talked to them, and they for sure do not want a projector. Lee was thinking the 75-inch Vizio P Quantum for $1,600 would be their best bang for their buck. Where they live, Best Buy is really their only option for looking at big TVs. Lee's cousin liked the 75-inch Samsung Q70R for $2,000 the best. So which 75-inch TV would we recommend, keeping in mind they prefer to keep their budget as low as possible? Well, if as low as possible, you go with the Vizio. Looking in the store is really... very, very difficult to ascertain any sort of quality. You really can't. I have to be honest with you. It's so easy for them to go into the settings and jack up the brightness on one and just lower the brightness on another, and suddenly the one that has the brightness higher is selling more simply because somebody adjusted the settings on it. You're under fluorescent lights, usually in non-optimal spaces, and who knows what kind of viewing angles you've got going on there.
It's hard to see the uniformity issues that crop up when you're in a dimmer situation and that. Like, back when I was getting one of my first LCDs, I was like, I saw an LG LCD TV that I thought in the store, I thought that doesn't look too bad, and the price was really attractive, and I brought it home, and I'm like, whoa, is that cloudy in that backlight? Which I couldn't see at all in the store. Didn't notice it at all. And I tried to look at dim and black images in the store, and it just didn't show up the way it did at home. But I mean, so the Vizio P Series Quantum, that is my top pick for a value television. I think it's very good, but it is that whole thing of the Vizios don't use panels that are quite as uniform. There's some banding, there's some little uniformity, and the Samsung LCD panels in their QLEDs are just flat out better as far as uniformity goes. And the Q70 is an excellent television as far as value goes. You said they are gamers as well, and gaming on a Q70 is about as good as it gets. It's got the variable refresh rate thing if they got an Xbox One. It's a really good TV. So if that's the one that they really love, yeah, it's taking up $400 more out of their budget. If that's going to be the deciding factor, then I do like your pick of the Vizio P Series Quantum, but I'm also not going to try and steer someone away from a Q70 because it's a really, really good TV and a really good value at that price.
Well, if they're buying from Best Buy, I would just say don't throw the box away. Basically, I get the Vizio to start with, hang it on the wall, turn down the lights, watch some darker movies and lighter movies, and maybe play a game on it and see if you like it. If you're like, yeah, this looks great. I don't know what Rob's talking about. Cloudiness doesn't make any sense to me. He says, because you may say that and then
I am pretty darn picky,
and then you're like, live with it and just be. I'm not live with it. Just live with it for a few days, or maybe a week or so, and see how you feel about it. If by the end of that you're like, man, it looks great to me. Well, then
you just saved $400. That's true.
But if you get it, you start watching it, you're like, I wish you hadn't said anything about cloudiness because now I can totally see it.
Don't forget the banding.
Then you're gonna have to talk to you send Rob an angry letter that he owes you $400 and then go buy the Samsung. He says with the remaining $1,000 max, they say. Spending less would be preferable. What can they get for their audio system? I never understand. I swear. I mean, I understand people, that thought process, but you're going to buy one TV and then you want to spend a fraction of that amount on all of the rest of the stuff that you're going to have to get.
That is very common, though.
It's very common.
Very
common.
It,
let's put it this way. This is how I spend my money, right? Subwoofers is a amount of money.
Honestly, if you could, the room first. Whatever you can do to the room, that's number one.
Yeah. But if we're just talking about gear, subwoofers is an amount of money. The rest of the speakers is the same amount of money, and the TV is the same amount of money or less. So, because I think that.
But we are uncommon. We are 20 some odd years each into our home theater journeys. That's where we've arrived. This is their first home theater, and they're like, I want a big TV, which is not uncommon.
So for $1,000, what can they get for their audio system? Lee was thinking he might be able to convince them to get a refurbished receiver from Accessories for Less, along with a 5.1 Boston Acoustic speakers package. What would we suggest? I imagine they're really going to want small speakers, like
sort of what I'm envisioning.
Really small
speakers.
Yeah. They're.
We don't know that for sure.
No, but if this. At this level of people wanting to buy stuff, a lot of times they've seen so many Bose systems in other people's houses that they think that that's the
or they're thinking soundbar,
should be going by.
Which nobody could be blamed for thinking soundbar these days.
Nobody could be blamed for it either. But we would not recommend. But you could do it. But if we're going to do it, you're going to spend over $1,000 on a soundbar. Because someone wants you to get a Yamaha DSP projector, and you're like, sound projector, not a Anyways, by the way, you can get a much bigger screen for less than $2,000 with a projector. I'm just going to throw that out there. You could get
a non-starter, Tom.
You could get a 92-inch screen up front with a projector for less than $2,000.
Could be done.
Just saying, it would be majestic. Throw that out there. I mean, I think the Boston Acoustics will be all right.
Be all right.
You're definitely going to have to go Accessories for Less for your receiver, because $1,000.
Not necessarily, because at the moment, Denon's X1500H, which, you know what, if they're not going to do 7.1.4, if 5.1 or 5.1.2 will do them, and I'm almost certain it will. The X1500H, Amazon's selling them off for $300 right now, which is the same as the refurbished price at Accessories for Less, but that's brand new.
All right.
And Amazon, I'm like, wherever you are in the States, I'm pretty sure Amazon can deliver a receiver to you. So that should be okay. So the X1500H is like, to me, that's a lock at $300. Just go grab one at Amazon right now. But then what speakers are going to go? I mean, the Boston Acoustics would be fine. Also, though, I'm like, this is not a tiny room. It's a very capable, and it's not a super powerful receiver. I'm like, Klipsch's Reference Theater Pack, which are compact speakers, but it's Klipsch is really highly efficient. The subwoofer really isn't producing the last octave, 36 hertz extension at the best of times. It's not sufficient for this room size, but given what we expect they're probably looking at anyway, so $570 at Amazon again can grab you that Klipsch Reference Theater Pack, which I think is not bad. It's way better than the TV speakers, like a gazillion times better than the TV speakers. And
especially from 9
Oh
feet.
yeah. That'd work. But my choice, if I had my druthers, what I would be getting would be the Pioneer Andrew Jones 5.0 speaker pack, which actually includes the towers in that. So if they do want bigger speakers and they want towers, you can't $490 for a pair of towers, a center, and a bookshelf surrounds. That is ridiculous for those speakers. Again, at Amazon. And then I would love them to get a PC2000. In fact, I would love them to get a 3000 series subwoofer in a 5,000 cubic foot room.
That's like their entire budget.
But don't quite see that being in the cards. So one of my favorites for a nice, very inexpensive, but pretty darn decent sub, definitely better than the tiny little sub that comes in the Reference Theater Pack. Dayton's sub 1200. Parts Express has it for $150. Can't beat that. You can't beat that. And that still fits within their budget. So, the Dayton sub 1200, the Pioneer Andrew Jones speakers, the Denon X1500H. But if they want tiny speakers, I like the Klipsch's. the reference theater pack.
I guess the NHT Super Zeros, they're right now $64 but they are the 2.1s are, I mean, they're small. I don't know how
they're
loud
tiny.
they're going to get at your area. They are small. You would have to get 5 of them, and then the center is about double the cost. So I don't know what that ends up being, but four of those, and then the center for your 5.0. But yeah, the subwoofer is going to be the real.
It is. That's going to be the tough
here.
one. But you can't beat the sub 1200 for $150. That's yeah, it's pretty good.
So his cousins are into DIY, so making acoustic panels is definitely likely. But what else would help the audio experience in this room? Clearly, a ceiling would help. So what tips do we have there for the room overall? Well, okay, so the ceiling would help mostly in making sure that the sound doesn't go up through it.
Well, I mean, right now it's
floor.
completely, it's the unfinished basement there, completely bare ceiling right now, which means, whatever's going on downstairs or upstairs, you can hear plainly in the other floor. There's nothing at all.
So you definitely want to put insulation between up above you and then finish off that ceiling. Now, you can do it a number of different ways, depending on how worried you are about soundproofing, or not soundproofing, sound reduction. Let's be more honest here. So you could do 2 layers of drywall on your ceiling with green glue in between. That would help
a lot.
if you decide to do that. I really don't. It doesn't sound like that Atmos would be the sort of thing that they would be very interested in.
In this room setup, but are we even going to worry about it?
I don't think they care for us to even talk about it. So that means you don't have to worry about
big holes
in the ceiling that's going to making holes in it. So that gives you a nice big spot. But yes, as much room treatments in here as you can. The space is really wide, so your first reflection points are behind you.
Well, I mean, they're not. They're just far off to the side. It's going to be quite an angle to them.
Yeah, what I mean is that when it reflects, it's going to reflect behind you. I don't see if you're 9 feet into this room, unless your speakers are way out towards the corners, it's going to reflect.
Well, it's going to be like 4 feet in front of you, but way over to the side.
Yeah. Right. So I would not worry so much about that. I would do as much corner trapping as I could, and as many room treatments around here as you could. Look at our
Rob W's printed panels.
Well, not those. Yes. Look at his for the DIY instructions, but instead of printed panels, you could look at making them bigger and then getting those burlap sack thingies if you're into that sort of thing. But those are more expensive than I thought they were going to be. I don't remember what they were, but they were more expensive.
But honestly, having insulation in the ceiling, that's a lock. That should be done probably no matter what anyway. But in a basement situation like this, I still like a dropped tile ceiling. You know, they said the bottom of the joists in this basement are 8.5 feet. So you've got the ceiling height, you know, even with a drop tile ceiling. If you do a 8-inch, you know, so now you're going to be at 7 feet, 10 inches. That's really not too bad. I mean, especially for a basement, that's very reasonable. So I would probably, I don't know what's, you know, most basements, you do have wiring, plumbing, ducting that you might need access to. That's why drop tile ceilings are sometimes even code related, because you need access to those things and you totally still have it. Now, the difference, of course, is you don't get the super paper thin ceiling tiles, you know, which are obviously very cheap but do nothing sound wise. You go for actual acoustic ceiling tiles, which don't do a tremendous amount sound isolation wise, but have now acted like absorption panels a little bit. I mean, that's what you use in office buildings, and it does reduce on the echo within the room. And then if you do run into sound isolation issues and you're thinking drop tile ceiling, acoustic ceiling tiles, how am I going to get sound isolation? A layer of mass loaded vinyl above that drop tile ceiling can be almost as good as a regular drywall ceiling. And it's still something you can move out of the way when you need access, so it doesn't bring up any kind of code problems. So I'm in favor of a drop tile ceiling in a basement like this.
Sure. And that just gives you another place to put a bunch of insulation as well. And, you know, all of that. I wouldn't worry too much about diffusion. I mean, I think in a place like in an area like this, I think your diffusion should look a lot like bookshelves with DVDs on them, you know, and CDs and whatever else you have down there.
Or some of that stuff that's down there might stay down there and add a bit of clutter and odd surfaces to the space. Yep.
Yeah. and carpet the floor. I can't tell if it's
Yeah, it was a bit
carpeted or
hard to
not. I
see,
think
but
it looks like it might be. It's hard to tell.
I can't
So
quite tell.
carpet the floor. I think you're good there. So on a different note here, Lee says for someone else, a close friend, she's looking for the cheapest projector. Okay, Craigslist is your
There is
friend,
that.
except that remember when you buy something off of there, the lamp on that thing is either dead or about to be dead, so you're going to spend whatever money that is. So use that as a bargaining chip. Apparently she has her sight set on some $300 model on Amazon from a Chinese brand that Lee has never heard of. The specs look crazy to Lee. I don't know what that means.
It was claiming like
Wouldn't know what crazy-
6,000 lumens, but it's using some teeny tiny little lamp. It made no sense.
Oh. So he's turning to us. What's the cheapest projector we would recommend these days? Wouldn't it be something like that? Honestly, you can get. I mean, if she's looking for, if she only cares about price, Craigslist, eBay. These are all really good options for finding used projectors, and that you can get for oh, the bulb is out. Oh, it's got this or it's
Sometimes
got that.
those bulbs cost like honestly, $160 though. So all of a sudden,
I know the bulb itself. Yeah, well, I mean, but if she's looking at $300 model and you can get a projector for a couple $100, then $100 bulb or whatever, and you're suddenly right back in the same thing, and you've got a better projector than whatever that thing was going to be. So you do have to worry about what any damage or whatever problems it may have picked up of green blobs or whatever that can happen on the screen. But at $300 or this price point, you literally do not get to complain as long as it makes an image. That's what you're fine. So what do you got, Rob?
Let's say you are buying on Amazon, and let's say it is something I would actually recommend. Like if somebody comes to me and says, I want a cheap projector, but I want it to be as good as it can be, my choice would be BenQ's HT 2050A, which is darn good. Full Rec 709, 1080p, DLP, actually has a little bit of vertical lens shift, which you wouldn't expect at this price or on DLP to begin with, 1.3 times zoom, so it's pretty darn excellent, but it's $650. I don't know if she'd be willing to look that high. So what happens when you go lower in BenQ's lineup? Well, you can get the MH535 FHD, standing for full HD, still 1080p. Still pretty decent. It's a little worse in like every way. The blacks are a little bit worse. The contrast isn't quite as high. The color isn't quite as wide, but it's still 1080p, still a DLP, drops you down to a 1.2 times zoom. So not very much, but enough to adjust it a little. No more lens shift whatsoever. Not that we would expect it, but it does get the price down to $500. Still too expensive? BenQ has an MW535A. You can find those for $300 on Amazon, although the retail price is $400, but you can find them on Amazon from other sellers for $300. It does drop the resolution down to WUXGA, or whatever the thing is, 1280 by 800 anyway. It's actually 16 by 10. It's not 16 by 9 anymore. It's 1280 by 800, but it still accepts a 1080p signal, and it's basically the MH535 FHD, but with a lower resolution chip. So one of those is going to be better than whatever this crazy knockoff Chinese brand thing was that she was looking at. So yeah, get one of those.
All right, Chris. At Chris's church, they use a large venue projector. He's pretty sure it's a 6000 series Epson. It's about 3.5 years old, and when he checked, it said it had 850 hours in the lamp. It has developed a very obvious hotspot right in the middle of the screen. It is so obvious that even though Chris is visually impaired, he can easily see it. It certainly didn't look that way before. The screen is only 135 inches, and it's a 1.1 white daylight, so he's pretty sure the screen isn't to blame in any way. So what could have caused that to happen, and would replacing the lamp solve the issue? Is there some other way to fix it? A lamp? I don't know how the lamp.
I think something got onto or within the light path of, because this is an LCD. It's an Epson. It's an LCD. The light path is not sealed. I think something got in there. I mean, I don't know exactly why it would be super duper hot spotty right in the middle.
Maybe blurry. Maybe it's blurry there. There's something on the lens or something. But usually something like that, you end up burning out your bulb if you have, if it reflects back at all. So it's very strange.
I mean, without seeing it for ourselves, it's tough to diagnose exactly what's doing this.
Well, taking a picture of it would be almost impossible.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah.
Getting the exposure right on that to show you what it's doing. I mean, he was like, he's heard of hot spotting before, but that's usually like, from the get-go. It doesn't like develop over time. Why would something like that happen? If you said it with this, like suddenly got a green blob, we'd know that that's just dust on the LCD panel itself. I don't know how frequently the filter is being cleaned on this projector and how dusty the church is, but that can impact these sorts of things. I mean, could it be as simple as you do have like something has actually like occluded around the middle, right? Like some dust has gathered around the edges, so it's actually darkened those, and the middle now is just as bright as it ever was, but the edges got darkened because, I don't know, a spider laid some eggs in there or something. I don't know what's going on.
Well, you could...
It's not impossible. The light path is not sealed.
I mean, could somebody have gotten there and done something with the settings to make it like so overly bright that it's blowing out the center of the image? I mean, I don't know.
That doesn't sound right to me.
I don't see how. Yeah, I don't see how. It does sound like it's something.
Yeah, no, my guess is something got into the light path, which means what your projector needs is a good cleaning. Yeah. I think that's it more than, I mean, how would the lamp aging result in this? That doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. No, it's not going to. I mean, if it was, it would be like, you ever see like a lamp, and if you see slow motion pictures of somebody's touched it, like a real hot lamp, like you would have in a projector, if you touched it with your skin, you get oils on the lamp. Then where that oil, it flecks the heat back in.
Right.
And it creates that thing expands and explodes, but that happens in seconds. Yes. It doesn't happen over long periods of time. So, it's not the lamp. I don't think so. No,
my guess is something got in the light path, and your projector needs a good cleaning. Which not like a user level cleaning. Probably needs to be professionally opened up and cleaned.
Yeah, call around. Jack. Yes. How far apart do subwoofers need to be in order to no longer be considered co-located? That's a good question. I don't know. Across the room, usually, is the way that I measure it. And no matter the size of your room, that's the distance it needs to be, diagonally or directly across the room from it.
Well, in a way, it's related back to when we were talking about using many small drivers to produce the surface area of a larger one, that if you vertically stack a whole bunch of little drivers, that it will begin getting directional once the total distance from edge to edge of that stack of drivers exceeds the wavelength of whatever frequency you're producing. That'll start to become directional. That does theoretically still apply to bass, although not inside of a room. So if we were going by that, I mean, first of all, 20 hertz is still 55 feet long, so your room isn't big enough in all likelihood. Right. But your subwoofer is definitely playing up to, let's call it 80 hertz. It is, in fact, still producing sounds above 80 hertz. It's a crossover, not a brick wall filter. But let's take 80 hertz as an example, which is a 14-foot long, approximately, wavelength. So strictly speaking, if your subwoofers are more than 14 feet apart, they are definitely not co-located anymore as far as any of the major frequencies that the subwoofer is playing. But there are still all these wave interaction things that take place down to 1/4 of the wavelength. So the subs are basically acting in unison as long as they're within 1/4 of the wavelength of any frequency they're playing. At 80 hertz, that'd be 3.5 feet. So if your subs are greater than 3.5 feet apart, you're starting to get into some potential little phase differences that could at least appear in measurements. Whether you'd hear them, I don't know, but they could start to appear. But if they're closer together than 3.5 feet, they are essentially co-located. They're within 1/4 wavelength of all the major frequencies the sub is playing.
I guess my rule of thumb would be, if I can touch it from touching the other one, it's too close.
But mathematically speaking, 3.5 feet.
3.5. I mean, 3.5. So Jack's room is in a regular shape, so he can't just use the subwoofer placement in the rectangular room guidelines. What he could do is put 2 subwoofers behind his false wall at the front of his setup, and then put another 2 subwoofers at the back of his setup in a custom enclosure. But the 2 subs at the back will only be 2 to 3 feet apart. So if we were to use a multi-sub optimizer software, should he identify the 2 subs at the back as a single sub given their relatively short distance apart? And Rob already answered that by saying basically they are not. And I answered it by saying, if you can touch them.
Yeah,
They're
no, the
co-located.
2 to 3 feet is under 3.5 feet. Those are co-located subs. Now,
Yeah.
would it harm anything by setting up your mini DSP as 4 independent sub outputs, telling the multi-sub optimizer software that you have 4 separate subs, letting it crunch the numbers for 4 separate subs, and doing things that way? Would it harm anything? No. You could still do that. Would it have any effect versus saying the 2 at the back are really just 1 and feeding them both the same signal? Shouldn't. All the theory says it shouldn't. They should act like they're co-located. But who knows in this crazy world? I mean, if you got the
Plus,
time and you're willing to try.
It's an enclosure in the back. I would.
Yeah, there's that too.
Yeah. I would just put them as 1 and call it good.
Yeah.
But that's me. What we're going to have to do here, Rob, because I have to hard stop at 11:30. So
skip
we'll
Steve's,
keep
but
going.
get somebody else's, or
No, we can keep going.
Okay.
And if I have to go, then you'll finish
Oh,
and
yeah.
sign off.
sounds
And that'll
good.
be the end of it. Okay. Steve upgraded from a 5.1.2 setup using a Denon X1500H to a 7.2.4 setup using a new Denon X3600H plus a Marantz MM7025 140 watt per channel stereo amp. He's got Paradigm monitor speakers up front, KEF Q150s for surrounds, Sonos in walls and in ceilings for surround backs and overheads, and dual SVS PB2000 subs, which he says are awesome because they are. He's using an Epson Pro Cinema 4050 projector with a Panasonic UB820 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. So he's got a lot of good gear, basically. He obtained a copy of the 4K Dolby Atmos demo disc that's handed out at trade shows, but when he goes to play it, he gets an error message on the screen saying that he needs to use a Dolby Vision enabled Ultra HD Blu-ray player, and the disc won't play. The UB820 is a Dolby Vision player. He's gone into the menus and tried turning on Dolby Vision on and off, but no matter the settings, the disc won't play. Any suggestions? Yeah, don't play it on a what's a projector, because they don't accept Dolby Vision.
I mean,
So,
that is the issue. The projector for sure doesn't do Dolby Vision. But the weird thing is, was this disc only authored in Dolby Vision and it doesn't have an HDR10 layer, given that this is not a public release disc. It's not sold anywhere. It's not meant to be handed out to the public. That is not impossible. It is possible the only HDR on this disc is Dolby Vision, that there is no HDR10 layer, and therefore, unfortunately, this thing just ain't gonna play. Now, what you could try doing, if you don't already have all this is ridiculous, but if you do already have a PC with a UHD friendly drive, you could use MakeMKV to create a backup of that disk. MakeMKV doesn't do Dolby Vision. Well, supposedly there's some workarounds at this point, but I don't know any of them. Natively using MakeMKV, it'll just take the HDR10 layer. So if you were to make a backup of this disk and there is no HDR10 layer for MakeMKV to grab, you will know for certain there's just no HDR10 on this disk. There's only Dolby Vision, and unfortunately, there's no way to make that play on your projector because projectors don't do Dolby Vision.
So he has put two 2-foot by 2-foot absorption panels on his back wall and two 2-foot by 4-foot panels on his front wall. What locations would we recommend for adding more panels?
And there's some images there and below. If they...
All right, I'm trying to look at it. So the right wall is nothing but window.
It is.
And the left wall has right at the front, where you're right on the front wall, there's a walkway back to a door, and then the wall next to him has double doors. It looks like it might be a closet or a bathroom or something on them. And then past that, it looks like it's a cubby with
like a DVD case in there, a bookcase,
discs or whatever.
Yeah.
I would recommend getting 2 freestanding panels at least to put on the sides where the first reflection points would be, and especially since you can move them around.
So like one over in front of the windows on the right, and another one just freestanding on the left. Yeah.
Yes. I think can you put stuff on your ceiling? Because that angled ceiling is just screaming for some at the back. So the back of his room is got it's like an A-frame.
Yeah.
But it's the back part of the A-frame. So it's a flat ceiling, but then it has an angle for a couple of feet. It looks like maybe 3 or 4 feet. And then it goes straight down from there. And there's a door at the very, very back. It looks like the center back of the room. And he's got his 2 2x2 panels on either side of that door. So a to either side of your projector. Could you put something on the ceiling there?
Mm-hmm.
That would work.
Yeah.
You
I'd
could
be in
also
favor of that, in fact.
up front, on either side of your center channel, like a GIC corner trap, the tri-traps. Just lie that on the floor right there on either side of that.
And in fact, a
work.
panel behind the center speaker itself, since he has panels behind his front left to right towers, I'd be quite in favor of that.
Yeah, he doesn't have a ton of room there because it looks like he's got a outlet, a cutout for the speaker. He would have to either custom make it so that the speaker wire would go through the panel, or just a real thin panel, which you could do all the way across there.
Yep. Now let's see. I mean, so the front right corner is a possibility, but what's happening in the front left corner? Well, it's the open thing to the doorway down the little, very short hall.
The right back
tough
corner's got a plant in it, and maybe I don't know what that is. Oh no, just a plant. It looks like. So maybe the back right corner, put the plant on.
But my number one pick for you would be along the front wall, like Tom suggested, and along that angled part of the ceiling behind you there. In fact, that one I would quite like to put some treatment on that angled part of the ceiling if it were me.
So when he was using his 5.1.2 configuration, he installed his 2 overhead speakers as top middles. And since the ceiling starts to slope down behind the seats, the top middles are just a little in front of his seats. When he upgraded to 7.2.4, he put 2 more in-ceiling speakers farther in front of him. He can label them as front heights, and he thinks it sounds good. But would it sound even better if he had a pair of overhead speakers behind him? He's thinking he could install something on that angled portion of the ceiling behind the seats, and he would just disconnect the top middles. What do we think? I mean, don't love it.
He doesn't have a ton of space behind his seats. I mean, some.
He doesn't, and you're going to end up running into your surround backs, because he does have surround backs over here. They're going to be within inches of your surround backs.
Well, no, I mean, they could be a few feet above the surround backs.
Yeah. I if you think it sounds good, I would not.
I know.
I would just stick.
I mean, even I am a bigger Atmos fan perhaps than Tom is, but I'm looking at this, I'm like, you still get front to back movement, you still get left to right movement. That's really all I care about with Atmos, is the sense of movement. That, why I like having 4 and not only 2, because you get no front to back sensation at all with only 2, but you still get it with your current setup. Top middles are nice, to be honest. It gives you that, more noticeable, that's coming from above me type of thing. My honest recommendation is to keep what you have and continue enjoying it.
Yeah. Jack has a completely unfinished basement. He's getting ready to start the planning for his home theater build. At the moment, it's a bare block foundation, and the ceiling is completely exposed and empty. The only drywall present is in the stairway leading upstairs. There's a door at the top of those stairs, just a standard hollow core door at the moment. Jack is trying to figure out the right level of soundproofing. Right now, completely unfinished, there's basically no reduction of sound between the basement and the first floor. If someone is talking upstairs, you can easily hear everything they're saying in the basement. But the full room within the room with double layers of drywall and green glue seems like overkill to him. In his mind, as far as walls go, he figured he'd be putting up normal framing, which would automatically mean his drywall is decoupled from the block foundation. I mean, it's decoupled if you don't attach it to the block foundation.
Well, sometimes people just put up furring strips, though, so that would connect it. But normal framing in front of the block foundation, drywall on that, one layer.
Yep, that would be decoupled. Then he'd put normal bat insulation in the walls and put a single layer of drywall. He knows that won't provide dead silence, but that's the sort of level of construction and soundproofing he has in mind. So where he's struggling is deciding what to do with the ceiling. He doesn't want to lose his ceiling height by installing a drop tile ceiling. Okay, Rob, that's for you. And he wants to have in-ceiling Atmos speakers plus about 20 can lights. Holy crap, this is
I'm sure they're the small ones, but lots of them.
So, at least putting insulation in the ceiling joist seems like a given, right?
Yes.
But how? Yeah, I think it might be code as well. But how far should he go after that? Just put up a single layer of drywall as normal and call it a day? do a regular single layer of drywall but make backer boxes for every can, light, and Atmos speaker? Or should he go all out and use sound clips with hat channels, 2 layers of drywall, green glue in between, a full double drywall plus green glue backer boxes? Would it even make sense to go all out on the ceiling and then have the single drywall walls? Well, okay. If your walls are not attached to the wall,
Yeah.
in any way, if they're freestanding, then they are decoupled, which means sound transference in between is greatly reduced. So if you're going to do that, then going more all out in the ceiling makes more sense. In fact, not doing something on the ceiling makes no sense because you've done this to the walls for no reason.
Well, except that it is normal construction anyway, what he's planning to do with the walls, other than opting for framing instead of just furring strips. So, I mean, I don't think you need to do the all out. I also don't particularly want you to just attach 1 layer of drywall directly to your ceiling joists. There is an in-between, and that is your standard old resilient channel. Because that doesn't take up a ton of, I mean, it's a little bit of extra height, but usually you do something to the ceiling just to level it, right? Because usually ceiling joists aren't perfectly level. So instead of just the normal strapping that you might put across your ceiling purely for leveling purposes, you make those resilient channels instead. That's not quite as good as hat channels with sound clips, but it is better than the drywall being directly coupled to the joist. It does decouple them a little. It gives that flexibility of resilient channel. The problem with resilient channel is that it's very easy to install incorrectly. As long as it's installed correctly, it's effective. Now, does he go single layer or double layer? Does he add green glue in between double layers? I'm kind of in favor of just doing 1 layer of drywall on resilient channels. I mean, that's basically what you've done with your walls. You're more or less equaling it on your ceiling in a very cost-effective and not space-consuming way.
Just make sure you lose insulation everywhere.
But the thing is, above that 1 layer of drywall, I want him to cover in all of these openings because otherwise they are just openings. And you might as well just put big old holes in your ceiling. I do want you to cover all the openings. They don't have to be the ridiculous, overbuilt backer boxes that, soundproofing company would recommend you building because that's to equal the overbuilt rest of the room. We're talking normal container, they could even be your standard, what you would install in an attic cans for fire safety purposes. But I want you to have something covering all these holes that you're putting in your ceiling. Don't just throw them up there open backed. But that's about it. That's the level of soundproofing you're talking everywhere else in your room.
So he says, what about the stairwell that is already drywalled? Seems like a pain to tear it all down and have to refinish it, but he's pretty sure there isn't any insulation behind it right now. So maybe it's kind of a weak spot. What do you think he should do there? I'm a little unclear as to where this stairway is. Is it on a wall? If it's not on a wall, if it's just sort of in the middle of the room, like the last room we were talking about, it's not really a weak point because it's not really attached to anything except for the ground. And
I'm picturing
ceiling.
more like, a fairly rectangular space that just has an opening on one of the walls that is the stairways going up. That's sort of what I'm picturing in my mind.
Right. I mean, it's just a little bit of drywall. You're already doing drywall anyway, so you just have to open up one side and fill it with insulation.
I know.
Add the resilient channels and call it a day.
How huge is this stairwell? Is it really that much to pull down just the drywall that's in there? I mean, you're talking about finishing the entire rest of the room. I mean, I kind of can't picture not pulling it down and at least insulating inside all the bays. Because even if you did, the simplest thing would be to throw a second layer of drywall over the existing drywall in the stairwell. Whether that'll work with the space provided, I'm not sure, but we are talking just a half an inch on each side. But even if you did that, you still got no insulation back there. And I say pull down the drywall that's in the stairwell. It's a stairwell. Can't be that big.
All right, who we got left? I got to go.
Yes, indeed. We have Jules, which is a very long question, but we shall dig into that first next week, Jules. Let's see. That's a lot of scrolling while I did all of that vamping. Ryan F., RSV, and Mark N. That is everybody on the list for next week.
All right, I want to thank our listeners of the week, Steve, for going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. And I was so proud of myself for not saying the www that I screwed up everything else. buy us a cup of coffee link and giving us a PayPal donation, and to our 88 patrons, including James, House of Cards, over at patreon.com. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, patrons, and thank you, James.
Yeah, Steve, thank you for that donation. Thank you to our 88 patrons, patreon.com/AVRant Podcast if you want to sign up. And James, House of Cards C, thank you for being one of our patrons. Did just want to say, Tate, don't worry, I got your question on Monday, so you're on the list too.
For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.